Hi, I'm Sumrit. I work with askIITians.com as a biology expert. Today we are going to discuss how to solve questions related to the chapter Body Fluids and Circulation. So let's go to the first question. So the first question says the atrioventricular node, and it gives us different options. So before we go on to the options, I'll just give you a brief summary of atrioventricular node. So atrioventricular node, or we also call it as AV node, is basically present in the heart. So what does it do is, it takes the electrical impulse from SA node and then gives it to bundle of hairs and then to Purkinje fibers. And this is responsible actually for ventricular contraction. But this process is actually delayed. The passing of signal from SA node to ventricles for contraction is delayed by AV node. So the purpose of this is to prevent untimely contraction of ventricles. Untimely ventricular contraction, because the ventricular contraction should occur only when the atria or atrium has emptied the blood, has ejected its blood into ventricles. So the correct option here is D, which says it delays the contraction of the ventricles of the heart. So D is the correct option. Rest of the options are incorrect. So why they are incorrect? So the first says it's a parasympathetic ganglion, which is incorrect. It is not a parasympathetic ganglion. Then the B is conducts an action potential from vagus nerve to the heart, which is also incorrect. It is carrying electrical impulse from SA node to the ventricles basically, and it sets the rhythm of cardiac contractions. This is also not correct. And the last is correct. It delays the contraction of the ventricles of the heart. Let's move on to the next question. So the next question says that cardiac output, which is a product of the heart rate and the stroke volume, which is the amount of blood pumped per contraction by either the left or the right ventricle, would most likely be. So the first, it says greater if measured using the stroke volume of the left ventricle. B will be greater if measured using the stroke volume of the right ventricle. C will be the same regardless of which stroke volume is used, and D is dependent on the viscosity of the blood. So before going on to the answers, let me tell you about cardiac output. So cardiac output is actually equal to the product of heart rate, which is number of heartbeats per minute, multiplied by stroke volume. So now the stroke volume is approximately 70 ml, which is stroke volume is the amount of blood or volume of the blood that is pumped out by each ventricle. So it is same for both the ventricles, whether right or left. And the heart rate is also constant in a particular person at a particular time. So cardiac output is a product of heart rate and stroke volume. So it should be the same whether we use the stroke volume of the left ventricle or the right ventricle. So the option is C, because the stroke volume for both the right and left ventricle at a particular given moment will be same. So the option is C. Rest of the options are incorrect. It is not dependent on viscosity of the blood, so D is incorrect. A and B are incorrect because it is saying, because that those imply that the stroke volume for left and right ventricle are different, but they are actually same. So the correct option is C. Let's go to the next question. So next question says, which of the following is responsible for the spread of cardiac action potential from one cardiac muscle to the next? So the cardiac cells are connected from each other with the help of gap junctions. So these gap junctions are responsible for communicating electrical impulse. Basically, They are responsible for sending signal from one cell to the another cell so that there is a uniform contraction of the cardiac muscle or the entire heart. So it is the gap junction. So this option A is correct. Desmosomes are adherent junctions. They are just holding the two cells together. They do not have much role in communication. Tight junctions are actually preventing the leakage of substances from one cell to another. So this is also an incorrect option. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter. It is actually not responsible for spread of action potential. It is generally responsible for creating electrical impulses. So this option is also incorrect. Let's go to the next question. So the next question says, in the congenital heart defect known as patent ductus arteriosus, the ductus arteriosus, which connects the aorta and the pulmonary arteries during fetal development, fails to close at birth. This will likely lead to all of the following except. So let's see what this question is talking about. So it is talking about a defect. We may not need to go into the details of the defect, but it is telling us that during the fetus development, there is a connection between aorta and pulmonary artery. So once during the fetal development, this connection is there, but at birth, the connection gets closed. In the normal baby, this connection gets closed. But if there is this defect, this connection remains open, it fails to close. So what can happen in this situation? So let me give you an idea about this situation. So as it says that the connection between aorta and pulmonary artery is open. So as we know that aorta is carrying oxygenated blood from heart to tissues, whereas pulmonary artery is carrying deoxygenated blood from lungs to tissues, from heart to lungs. So it is carrying deoxygenated blood from heart to lungs. So if the connection between these two remains open, which means there is a mixing up of this blood, mixing up of both the bloods will occur. So it means that the content of oxygenated blood in the aorta will decrease and the content of deoxygenated blood in the pulmonary artery will also decrease. Basically, there will be mixing of both the blood. So which means there will be more pressure on the left and the right ventricle. Like right ventricle will be under more pressure now to give deoxygenated blood. And the left will be under pressure to give oxygenated blood. Okay, so basically in this question, let's go to the options now. It says equal or increased oxygen, which will occur. So let's see, it says equal or increased oxygen concentration in the blood that reaches the systemic tissues. So this option is not going to occur because it says that equal or increased oxygen concentration in the blood that reaches the systemic tissues. But the blood that is reaching the systemic tissues should be oxygenated. It should not be deoxygenated. So basically the oxygen concentration in the blood that reaches the systemic tissues should decrease. It should decrease rather than increase because the oxygenated blood is coming from aorta. So it will be mixed. with the deoxygenated blood. So the oxygen concentration in the blood that reaches the systemic tissues will decrease rather than increase. So this is not likely to occur. So this looks like the correct option. So let's go to the next option, which says increase oxygen concentration in the blood that reaches the lung, which is true because oxygenated blood from aorta will go to pulmonary artery and hence to lungs. So which means the blood which is reaching the lungs is less deoxygenated. So there is increased oxygen concentration. So this is likely to occur. So this is not a correct option. Next it says increased workload imposed on the left ventricle, which I already said. Now there will be increased load on the left ventricle because it has to pump out more of oxygenated blood, and similarly right ventricle will have to pump out more of deoxygenated blood. So these are likely to occur, hence they are incorrect. So the correct option is A, which is not likely to occur, which is equal or increased oxygen concentration in the blood that reaches the systemic tissues. Now let's go to the next question, which says which chambers of the heart pump oxygenated blood? So this is quite a straightforward question. So as we know that the right part of the heart is basically pumping out deoxygenated blood to pulmonary arteries, and the left part, which consists of left atria and left ventricle, is pumping out oxygenated blood to aorta, you can say. So the correct option is to pulmonary vein and then to aorta also. So basically it is left atria and left ventricle. Option D, left part of the half the heart pumps oxygenated blood. Let's go to the next question. So next question says hypovolemic shock represents a set of symptoms that occur when a patient's blood volume falls abruptly. So this is most likely to occur during which of the following conditions? So hypovolemic shock is mainly, as the question says, there is decrease in blood volume. Decrease in blood volume due to which not enough blood reaches the tissues. So this blood volume decreases because of bleeding. So this is most likely to occur in case of arterial bleeding, because in arteries the blood flows with higher pressure. Higher pressure the blood flows. So obviously the chances of bleeding occurring from arteries are more. Like chances of losing blood from arterial bleeding are more. So basically this can lead to direct decrease in blood volume. And also arteries are the blood vessels that are mainly carrying oxygen to the tissues. So it is mainly due to arterial bleeding, there will be a direct effect in volume of blood, and which will lead to hypovolemic situation. So it is mainly the arterial bleeding that is most likely cause hypovolemic shock. So the correct answer is A. Rest of the options are incorrect. Let's go to the next question. So next question says the capillary network comprises the greatest cross-sectional area of blood vessels in the body with the highest resistance to blood flow. In a healthy individual, the highest blood pressure would most likely be found in. So the highest blood pressure is mainly found in aorta. It is the biggest artery, and from this basically the blood is getting pumped into the aorta. So here the pressure of the blood in the aorta is the highest. So the correct option is aorta. Whereas in other regions like vena cava is mainly receiving the blood. Superior and inferior, they are mainly receiving the blood from the tissues to the heart. So there the pressure, the flow of pressure, the flow of blood is not as at higher pressure as compared to aorta. So the option C and D are also incorrect because those are capillaries. So blood flows at highest pressure in the aorta. So the option is A. Let's go to the next question, which says gas exchange between the blood and the tissues occurs. So we have different options. It says throughout the circulatory system. B says in the arteries, arterioles and capillaries. C says in the systemic arteries only, and D in the capillaries only. So the correct option here is capillaries, because capillaries have a main role in gaseous exchange. Capillaries at the level of the tissues, systemic capillaries, they have a role in gaseous exchange. So it is mainly the capillaries. So the option is D. Other options are incorrect. Okay, so let's go to the next question, which says the typical lub-dub sounds heard in the heartbeats of a healthy person are due to. So before going on to the options, let me give you a brief overview of this lub and dub sound. So lub and dub sound. So the first is lub sound. It is produced by closing of tricuspid and bicuspid walls. So tricuspid wall is between right atrium and right ventricle, and bicuspid is between left atrium and left ventricle. So these walls close when the atrium have ejected their blood into the ventricle so as to prevent the backflow of the blood into the atrium. So their closing produces lub sound, and dub sound is produced by closing of semilunar walls, which are at the level of like ventricle and pulmonary artery and vein. So this prevents the backflow of the blood into the ventricle. So this question says, how are these sound produced? So the option should be closing of both bicuspid and tricuspid walls produces lub, and the closing of the semilunar walls produces lub and dub sound. So the option is A. Correct option is A. Rest of the options are incorrect. Let's go to the next question. So next question says the middle muscular layer of heart is known as. So it can be a confusing question if we go to the options. So let me just tell you about the heart. So the heart is enclosed in a double walled sac structure. Double walled sac, and that structure is called as pericardium. And the layers of the heart are epicardium, myocardium, and endocardium. Epicardium is the outermost layer, middle muscular layer is myocardium, and endocardium is the innermost layer. So based on this, the correct option is myocardium, which is option D. Rest of them are incorrect. Let's go to the next question. So next question says the origin of the heartbeat and its conduction is represented by the pathway. So this I already discussed in one of the previous questions, that when the electrical impulse is generated in the heart, it is generated from sinoatrial node, and from sinoatrial node it moves to atrioventricular node, and this then transfers it to bundle of His, and then from bundle of His it goes to Purkinje fibers, which then transfer the impulse to ventricles for their contraction. So the correct is A. A is the correct pathway. Rest of the options are incorrect. Let's go to the next question. So it says an anticoagulant used for preventing clotting in vitro is sodium oxalate. It prevents clot formation by, so as we know that when we get the blood test done, so the blood clotting needs to be prevented in the test tube. So because when the blood is taken in test tube, if it clots, it will not give us correct test. Correct test will not be there. So we need to prevent its clotting. So to do that, some chemical is added which is an anticoagulant to prevent clotting, and one of them is sodium oxalate. So what does sodium oxalate do is, so oxalate binds to divalent cations in blood, for example like calcium, which are required for blood clotting. So it combines with calcium, and this calcium is then not available for blood clotting. So this is how it acts. So it combines with cations in the blood. So the option is A. Rest of the options are not valid in this case. Let's go to the next question, which says during ventricular systole in a mammalian heart, so let's go to the options. The ventricular volume increases, which is not correct, because the ventricle volume is not increasing. Ventricles are contracting, so the volume of the ventricle is as such not increasing. The bicuspid valve opens, which is also incorrect. So during ventricular systole, basically when the ventricle, so the valves have got closed, not open, so they are not open. So it says ventricular pressure increases and becomes more than the arterial pressure, which is true, because during ventricular systole, when the ventricular systole has happened, then the atria have ejected their blood into ventricles. So the pressure in the atria is less, because most of the blood of the atria is ejected into ventricles. So the ventricular pressure increases and becomes more than the atrial pressure. So this is the correct option. And it says it becomes equal. The next option says it becomes equal to the atrial pressure, which is incorrect. Correct is C. Let's go to the next question. It says a rhythmic beating of cardiac muscle in a mammalian heart is initiated by the, so as I said, it's mainly the sinoatrial node. Sinoatrial node is the pacemaker of the heart, which then transfers the impulse to AV node and then further to Purkinje fibers, as already discussed. So sinoatrial node has the ability to generate electrical impulses. So this is the correct option is D, whereas the rest of the options are incorrect. So let's go to the next question, which says angina pectoris is due to, so angina pectoris is basically called as pain in the heart muscle. Pain in the heart muscle, which is due to insufficient supply of oxygen to the heart. So the correct option is D. Rest of the options are not correct. Let's go to the next question, which says the thickening of the walls of the arteries due to fat deposition is called. So this condition is basically called as atherosclerosis. So in this condition, what happens is the lipids like cholesterol, they form deposits in the arteries, and due to which there are plaques formed, and it affects the blood flow also. So this condition is called as atherosclerosis. So option B is the correct one. The other options mean something else. So aneurysm is a condition where there is a blood filled bulge formed in the blood vessel, which can lead to the rupturing of the blood vessel. So it is not due to the fat deposition. Then the next one, the C options, is arthritis, which is related to pain in the joints. And angina is the pain in the heart muscle. So the correct option is B, which is atherosclerosis. Let's go to the next question. So it says, in order for the blood to flow from right ventricle to the left ventricle in a mammalian heart, it must flow through. So let me describe you how the blood should go in this case. So the deoxygenated blood from tissues, it goes to right part of the heart. So first it goes to right atrium, then it goes to right ventricle, and from the right ventricle it will then go to pulmonary artery, and then it will go to lungs from there, and from where at the lung level, this deoxygenated blood, which has lot of carbon dioxide in it, this carbon dioxide will go into the air and oxygen will come from the lungs into the blood, and from the lungs the oxygenated blood then goes to pulmonary veins, and then to heart, it goes to left atrium. So this is the correct pattern. So the correct option is A, which is right ventricle, pulmonary arteries, lungs, pulmonary veins, and left atrium. So this is the correct option. Let's go to the next question, which says, if due to some injury the chordae tendineae of the tricuspid wall of the human heart is partially non-functional, what will be the immediate effect? So chordae tendineae, these are tendons that connect the papillary muscles of the heart walls. So if there is any problem in these, then it can interfere with the functioning of the walls, interfere with their functioning. So here we are talking about tricuspid wall. Now the tricuspid wall has the role of preventing the backflow of blood from right ventricle to right atrium, so that the blood goes in one direction only, from right atrium to right ventricle. It does not pass back to right atrium. So if there is any disruption in its function due to chordae tendineae, what can happen is the blood might flow back into the right atrium, due to which it can happen is that the blood flow to the pulmonary artery from right ventricle to right ventricle to pulmonary artery will decrease. So let's see which options we have. So the first option, it says the flow of blood into the aorta will be slowed down, which is not the case here, because the flow of blood into the aorta will be slowed down. It would have been the case when there would have been some dysfunctioning of semilunar walls. So these semilunar walls are responsible for preventing the backflow of the blood into the ventricle. So from the left ventricle, the blood flows into aorta. So if it would have been semilunar walls, then this option could have been true, but here it is not the case. So this is the incorrect option. Then the B option also is incorrect. It says the pacemaker will stop working. This is also incorrect. And the C option says the blood will tend to flow back into the left atrium, which again would have been the case when it would have been bicuspid wall, because it is the bicuspid wall which is present at the junction of left atrium and left ventricle. So if bicuspid valve would have any problem, then there could have been possibility of blood going back into the left atrium. So here this is also not true. The next one, it says the flow of blood into the pulmonary artery will be reduced, which seems true, because there could be a backflow of blood from right ventricle to right atrium. Hence the blood flowing into the pulmonary artery will be reduced. So this option D is the correct one. Let's go to the next question, which says people who have migrated from the plains to an area adjoining Rohtang Pass about 6 months back. So what is the change in them we can detect? So when we move from when we move to high altitudes, so such people who are initially not living in high altitude, when they move to high altitudes, they may face difficulty in breathing, because due to lack of oxygen supply, because in these areas there is less oxygen available as compared to other areas due to insufficient oxygen supply. So initially they might face some difficulty, and they may face some sickness like symptoms like nausea, fatigue, but later on when they have stayed there for a long period of time, their RBCs increase. There is a more production of RBCs because the hemoglobin is not available in much higher quantity to bind to the insufficient oxygen that is there. So to compensate for that, RBCs increase, which means the hemoglobin content increases. But the affinity of the hemoglobin towards the oxygen still remains less. So to compensate for that lower binding affinity to oxygen, the RBCs content increases. So the correct option is A, that they have more RBCs and their hemoglobin has a lower binding affinity to oxygen. So option A is the correct one. B is not the correct, because it doesn't hold valid that they are not physically fit to play games like football, which is not true. The C option could have been correct if it would have been just the case where they have just migrated. But here it is talking about the period of 6 months, which is a long period. So the C option is also not correct. And the D says have the usual RBCs count, but the hemoglobin has very high binding affinity to oxygen. So this is also not correct, because the RBCs count is more, but the hemoglobin has low binding affinity, which is the A. So this option is also not correct. So option A is the correct one. Let's go to the next question, which says in a normal adult human the average cardiac output is. So as I discussed before, that the cardiac output is the multiplication of stroke volume and the heart rate. Stroke volume and the heart rate. So the heart rate is generally around 70 to 72 beats per minute, and stroke volume is 70 ml around. So this brings us to around 4.9 liters or 4900 ml, or a little bit more than that. So it's approximately 5 liters. So the correct option is C. Remember, this B cannot be the correct option because 70 ml is the stroke volume, not cardiac output. So this can be a catch over here. Rest of the options do not match at all, and hence they are incorrect. Okay, so let's go to the next question, question 21, which says which is true of the human circulatory system. So the option A says the right ventricle of the heart has the thickest wall. So this option is not correct, because the right ventricle of the heart does not have the thickest wall. It is the left ventricle which has the thickest wall. So this option is not correct. So it is not true. It is not true. Then it says veins have thick walls consisting of smooth muscle cells to assist in returning blood to the heart, which is also not correct. Veins do not have thick walls. It is arteries which have thick walls. This is also incorrect. Then C says that blood flow is slowest in capillaries to maximize the diffusion of nutrients and waste. So this is true because in capillaries which are present near the tissues, there is a gaseous exchange and nutrient exchange occurs between the blood and the tissues. So there it is slowest so as to maximize the diffusion capability of nutrients and waste. So this option is correct and hence it is true. And the last says the left and right ventricles contract alternately, which is responsible for the pulse sound, which is not correct. They are not contracting alternately, they are contracting rhythmically. Let's go to the next question, which says all of the following are true about blood except. So let's go to the first option. So which says that RBCs live for about 120 days. So this option is correct because the lifespan of RBCs is about 120 days. So this is the correct option. So it is not valid for this question. Next it says WBCs are formed in the bone marrow, which is also true. All the blood cells are formed in the bone marrow, but remember it is the T cells which then go to thymus to mature and to develop. They are initially formed in the bone marrow, but they go to thymus to develop and mature. So this option is also true, hence it is not correct for this question. Because this question is saying all of the following are true about blood except. So we have to find which is not true and that will be the correct option. Next it says platelets are not cells but are cell fragments, which is also true. Platelets are fragmented cells, hence it is also not a correct option. So it leaves us with only option D, which basically says platelets derived from specialized cells known as neutrophils, which is wrong. They are mainly derived from bigger cells which are called as megakaryocytes. So this option is not true about blood, hence it is a correct option. Correct option is D. Let's go to the next question, which says which one of the following statements is correct regarding blood pressure. So before going on to the options and hence the answer, let's go to what is a normal blood pressure. So the normal blood pressure is 120 by 80, which is 120 systolic and 80 is diastolic. So let's go to the option. So it says 190 by 110 may harm vital organs like brain and kidney. So if you see 190 is a marked increase in blood pressure, 190 and 110. So if there is too much blood pressure, then it can harm vital organs. So this seems like a correct option. So let's keep it aside for a while. Let's go to the next options. Like 130 by 90 mm is considered high and requires treatment, which is not, because this is just plus 10 in both cases, which is not so high, so it does not require treatment, it is not high. Next it says 100 by 55 is considered as an ideal blood pressure, which is also wrong. Ideal blood pressure is 120 by 120 by 80. And the last it says 105 by 50 makes one very active, which is also not true, because in this case the diastolic pressure is a bit low, so it's not going to make one active. So this option is also not correct. So the correct is that this is considered very high blood pressure, 190 by 110. It can harm vital organs like brain and kidney. So the option A is the correct option. Let's go to the next question, which says a muscular wall is absent in. So muscular walls are generally present in veins and arteries and arterioles. So it's only the capillaries which lack the muscular wall. They lack muscular wall. So the capillaries is just a layer of endothelial cells, layer of endothelium. It does not have muscular wall. So the correct option is A. Rest of them have muscular wall. So those are incorrect options. Let's go to the next question, which says bundle of his is a network of. So as I discussed before, that bundle of his generally is present in the ventricular wall. So if this is your heart, These are the two ventricles. So here the bundle of His is present, and this then gives off Purkinje fibers in the ventricle. So it is present in the ventricular wall only. So it is a muscle fibers found only in the ventricular wall. So the option is B. These are not nerve fibers. So it rules out option A and D. And these are not distributed throughout the heart wall. So this rules out option C. So the correct option is B. Okay, so let's go to the next question, which says a vein that collects blood from one network of capillaries and transports it directly to a second capillary network in another region of the body without returning to the heart is called. So before going to the options, let me explain you about what kind of vein system is this. So there is a vein which basically what happens is, so we have like capillaries coming from different tissues, like capillary network. So these combine to form a bigger vein, which instead of going to the heart directly, it again splits into another capillary system. So this vein is called as portal vein, and this capillary system it's formed in another region of the body. So this is called as portal vein. So the correct option is C. Rest of the options are not correct. Let's go to the next question, which says compared to blood our lymph has. So lymph is a filtered form of blood, is a filtered blood. So lymph generally it is colorless. It is colorless fluid. So it has no RBCs. So let's see which option says no RBCs. So if we just have this much idea only, we can rule out some options. So let's say the first is has more RBC, which is not true. So this option is ruled out. No plasma, which is also not true. It's a filtered form of blood. It's a plasma without proteins. Let's keep this option aside. And the last it says more WBCs and no RBCs. So the C one, it says plasma without proteins, which is not true. It has proteins in it. And the last it says more RBCs and more WBCs and no RBCs. So this is the correct option, more WBCs and no RBCs. So option D is the correct one. Let's go to the next question, which says murmur is a disorder of SA node, AV node, heart walls or pulmonary vein. So murmur is a disorder mainly of heart walls. It is generally produced due to dysfunctioning of heart walls, which are like tricuspid, bicuspid walls, which you already discussed. So this option is C. Rest of the options are not correct. Let's go to the next question, which says in a cardiac output of 5250 ml per minute with 75 heartbeats per minute, the stroke volume is. So as I discussed before, that cardiac output is heart rate multiplied by stroke volume. So in this case, we are given this cardiac volume as 5250 ml and the heart rate is given as 75 beats per minute. So so we have to find the stroke volume, so which we can call it as X. So here we will get 70 ml. So the correct option is B. Remember that if there is a difference in units, we need to check the units are getting matched. Suppose if this was given to us in liter, then we would have got the answer in liters. We would have got like 70 divided by 1000 will give us 0.07 liters. If we would have got this answer, we would have to multiply it with 1000 again to get this 70 ml. So make sure the units are being checked. Let's go to the last question of this session, the question number 30, which says in a standard ECG, which one of the following alphabets is the correct representation of the respective activity of the human heart? So if you see that this is the ECG given in the picture, so in this case the P reflects the atrial depolarization. And QRS together reflects ventricular depolarization. And T wave represents ventricular relaxation, or it is, you can say, end of systole. So basically, as per this, the correct option is P, which is depolarization of atria. Rest of the options are not correct. So the correct option is A. So this brings us to the end of this session. I hope this session made you clear about how to approach the questions related to this chapter. Stay tuned for my next session. All the best.